warm welcome to our first talks of our Buddhafield online festival. We've had two lovely talks to start us off. Dhammamegha on the Buddha's begging bowl, and then Viryanaya on loving what is mortal. Just showing how once there's a theme for the festival, in this case, holding to nothing whatever, it prompts these rich reflections on that theme, which gives us something to chew on, a meat to discuss together. So let me now present our third speaker, Kamalanandi, and he's going to talk about "This is not what I am."
Thank you. Oh, what a great honour to be speaking alongside the two marvellous speakers that we've already had. Just a word before I start for people who don't know me or anybody watching on the Facebook Live or watching the recording afterwards. I'm completely blind in my left eye, so I can't control how it moves. So at the moment, I think it's looking that way. So yeah, you might find if you're trying to work out what I'm doing with my eyes, that a bit confusing. So just just take the whole lot in. Yeah, okay. So the title of my talk is "This is not who I am," and it's a brief personal reflection on the intersection between identity politics and the Anatta-lakkhana Sutta. So when I was asked to give the talk, I guess I was reflecting on the theme myself a lot, holding to nothing whatever, and my own experiences. And there's definitely been, clear events in my life when there hasn't been anything to hold on to, no certainty or security. So I was looking through them and wondering what to pick. I could go with the ending of my marriage, becoming a parent, having a nervous breakdown. That happened before becoming a parent, by the way. And but I decided to just pick two things that I would talk about that seemed to have some kind of a connection here. So I'm going with the situation where I watched my gender unravel in 2014, 2015, and also undergoing guidance in Buddhist insight techniques in 2018, 2019. So I was assigned female at birth and lived ostensibly as such until relatively recently. In 2014, after a couple of quite significant life changes, I began to shift a little bit what I was doing with my hair, clothes I was wearing. And that started an unraveling of a whole set of ideas I had had about living in my designated gender of being a girl and then a woman. It wasn't the first time it had happened. I had an earlier episode like this in my childhood where I chose to live like a boy for a while. So this time in 2014, it started off feeling quite liberating and quite freeing. And then that switched to feeling unnerving as it began to dawn on me that there was further to go. With each step, I began to see that there were more steps needed. So that's an incredibly simplified and shortened version of my experience of coming out as transgender at the age of 38. But suffice to say, it was distinctly uncomfortable and extraordinary to find myself in this position. And also maybe not that much of a surprise. I remember as a child having a view of adult life that you get there. You arrive at being an adult and that's you done. You've got the job, the relationship, the house, and you're sorted. It's not really worked out like that. Nothing has been guaranteed. And you don't really know what's going to happen next. There's nothing to hold on to. So I've been a Buddhist for 21 years, but it was only a few years ago that I felt like I'd kind of jumped down from the map and onto the actual terrain of the bit of Buddhist practice that's about seeing the illusion of having a self. I've been fortunate enough to have had some good teachers and guides and support of peers. And the work is really far from done, but a degree of liberation has occurred, which is nice. I was on retreat last year, and the main teacher used this phrase a lot in his talks. This is not mine. This is not me. This is not myself. I wrote it on the front of my notebook, and it took a while before I got round to trying to find out what it was and where it was from. But a little bit of Googling, and it turned it up pretty quickly. So it's from the Anatta-lakkhana Sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya. And it's a brief sutta that basically says that we can't really believe that we have a self, because if we did, then we surely wouldn't allow ourselves to suffer. That if we were in control, then we would be able to control that. And it says, because all of our constituent parts, form, feeling, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, which are also known as the skandhas, because they are all impermanent, and that according to this sutta, impermanent things are painful, that therefore they're not fit to be regarded as mine, me, or myself. You could be forgiven for thinking that coming out as trans in a Buddhist Sangha would be straightforward. It wasn't. It was incredibly hard, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But it was also a really good reality check, a good opportunity to take off the rose-tinted glasses. I've got a friend who's also in the Triratna Buddhist order, and she has a trans history herself. And we compared notes on what we call the surely phrases. And these are a stock list of statements that people in our Sangha would make at us on finding out about the shift in our gender identity. So here's a couple. But surely, because that's kind of, that's why we call them the surely statements, because they kind of always started like that. But surely, as a Buddhist, we should be going beyond identity. So aren't you going backwards because you're telling us you now identify as this gender instead? But surely you're investing in a sense of self now, and that's unskillful. Really good questions. And maybe by the end of this brief talk, I will have answered them or attempted to. So I mentioned that it's been hard coming out as trans in the Triratna Buddhist order. And that's partly because it's just not easy being trans. And I'm saying that as someone who lives in a country, that's the UK, with a fairly good public healthcare system and good legal protections in place for minorities like me. But just to show up in a space as a trans person is a form of activism. Our visibility has an effect. Moreover, there are still many things that are needed to be done. Still many things that are needed to be able to raise our quality of life up to that of the average cisgender person in the UK. So the word I just used now, cis, if you're not familiar with it, that's just the opposite of trans. So if you are cis, that just means you identify with the gender that you were assigned at birth. So yeah, we still need a lot of things to happen to raise our quality of life up to that of the average cisgender person in the UK. And we're currently in a time where we actually risk losing what rights we have under the current government. So it's fairly impossible to be trans and not be involved in some sort of activist work, whether that's pushing petitions around or writing to your MPs or taking part in marches or doing education work. If you've not come across this thing before, there's this thing called identity politics, this idea called identity politics. And it's when people have political positions based on things like their ethnicity, race, religion, rather than political positions based on a broader set of policies. And movements like Black Lives Matter would get labelled as identity politics, I should imagine. It's not a category that I would use to define my personal political perspective, but it's definitely been leveled at me that I'm caught up in identity politics. So I'm kind of in this hilarious position of being someone who's apparently practicing identity politics, whilst also being someone who is committed to undoing any sense of having a self on which to base an identity. So how is that possible? I think the answer lies in the conceptual construction of the relative and absolute. So on a relative level, I'm living in this world, operating within societal norms, legal structures, and economic realities. And I can be as awakened as I like, but I still need to find ways to eat and keep myself well. As a trans person, I need to navigate the healthcare system in order to get the medical support that I need to be well and happy. It's been a surprise to some of my cis Buddhist counterparts that this has been necessary. Another of the surely questions that I spoke of earlier, surely you don't need to make any changes to your body because you can work through all that with your meditation practice, which to me is like a Buddhist version of pray the gay away. And it can feel like a judgment that I'm just not Buddhisting hard enough. My answer to questions like this has been to go back to all the reasons why we might need medical support, any of us. There's loads of remedies and medicines and treatments that a lot of us need to be well. So I'm on high strength pain medication. I'll probably be on it for life because of an accident I had when I was younger. Without it, I wouldn't be able to work. I certainly wouldn't be able to sit here and give this talk. It works pretty well most of the time, and I'm really, really grateful for it. As well as that, I take CBD oil, and that really helps with my ability to stay focused because I have ADHD. Some people break bones. They need to go to hospital to get them mended. So there are all sorts of reasons to seek medical support to be well and happy. And being trans is one of those things. Well, to clarify, being trans like me is one of those things, because there are actually lots of folks with diverse gender identities who don't feel any need for medical interventions. And it doesn't make them any less trans or non-binary or whatever description they use to communicate their sense of gender or lack of it. The NHS has been treating trans people for decades because it's very clear that the treatment has the desired outcome of supporting people to become well and happy that were otherwise distressed by the incongruency of their sense of gender with the physical form that they were born with. And it's really great that there are ways to alleviate that particular kind of suffering, just like it's great that we have all these other ways of alleviating suffering. You just need to find the one that works. So it's on this relative level that I also feel the need to be involved in activist work, as being trans is still a hard thing to be, and too many of us are still being killed for it. And I'd like that not to happen. I want to work to alleviate that kind of suffering. And alongside this particular way of being in this world, I also know that this is not me. This is not mine, and this is not who I am. What I mean by this is that whilst I need to use certain labels to communicate my experience, so trans, Buddhist, dad, for example, those are just pointers to what my experience is so that I can communicate that to you. That's all they are. They just describe a bunch of stuff so that we can connect with each other. Those labels don't definitely pin me down to existing in a certain way. Nagarjuna says that we use words to go beyond words. So, in summary, I don't find any conflict in stating that I both know who I am on the relative level, and that if I happen to be doing, and if So if what I happen to be doing by trying to advocate for people like me to be treated with more kindness is called identity politics, then that's neither here nor there. And also, I know that this is not me. This is not mine, and this is not who I am. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kamalanandi. A big wave to you.